Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the SFSS debate. The first position is the VP of Internal and Organizational Development.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be your first VP Internal and Organizational Development with the SFP business. This role focuses a lot on policy development, working with council, and improving the SFS's internal processes. All things I've been doing this year is VP Finance. This year, I reduced the administration budget by $400,000 and shifted it towards advocacy and student support. I worked with board and council to reform the SFS so that student groups have a voice and a vote in decisions. I'm also currently working to distribute $400,000 of excess funds back to students in an emergency COVID-19 funding initiative. My best bet is I can go to the VP Finance and Services and work with them to see if there's areas throughout the year that ends up having underspending that occurred during the year, and see if we can shift and reallocate funds to support other areas that might have operational deficits at the start of the year, but maybe not throughout the rest of the year. Hi, thank you. I'm looking to clarify. I've already done that this year as the VP Finance. Currently, I am the chair of the working group for a transition committee around training and support. So I have members on there that are strongly focused on developing anti-oppression, equity-focused training support for the board, as well as committee members.
The second position that we'll be looking into is the Vice President of Finance and Services. Cole, are you ready to take the stage?
Yes, thank you. And also, just so you'll know, my name is Cole Gorst, not Grost. They spelt it wrong many times. But other than that, my name is Cole Gorst. I'm a BD student running for the position of VP Finance and Services. Well, I guess, to be fair, key clubs can be kind of subjective. There are hundreds of clubs at SFU. I know that the SFSS has sort of a surplus in their budget, so I want to try and use that to help the clubs that are struggling with engagement to keep their members happy, and hopefully with that we can relieve some of the burden for students who are paying the SFSS fees. No, those clubs are just as relevant as any other club. Increase communication with the Women's Center. You know, this is all about communication. Find out what they need, what their problems are.
Okay, and
so many questions.
Says that your quote in your platform that your dad is a VP for CUPE, which fully isn't relevant to the SFSS or at all indicative of your work, and your platform was written on the basis that you want to run in response to SFSS members. Okay, yeah, I'll maybe finish her comment. In response to SFSS board members calling out racial profiling and police brutality in defense of Black community members. Additionally, your platform suggests lowering the student activity fee. However, you have not shown any demonstrable knowledge of SFSS finances, and if this is even plausible. You haven't made any effort to connect with the current board either to gain any information on the current status of SFSS finances or services to develop a well-informed platform. Be honest, why are you really running?
Ooh, so critical. But yeah, I just mentioned that my dad was VP QP because his involvement with unions is kind of what inspired me to run with this union. In terms of the other part of the question, I have reached out to some of the past executives to see what the financial situation is like, so that's not entirely true.
Hey everyone, my name is Serena and I'm running to be your next VP University and Academic Affairs. I definitely do plan to continue the work that I've done on the Accessibility Committee. Yeah, so my strategies with trying to connect with different stakeholders is definitely just reaching out. I think it's all about just making those connections with different stakeholders and maintaining a respectful connection, but also really pushing for and not compromising on the values that are important to me. So in terms of tuition freeze, it is something that I support and that's part of my platform. My plan is, I think that the SFSS could do a better job of organizing students within their own DSUs and constituency groups so that we can mobilize as a collective behind an initiative like a tuition freeze, because we know that SFU
Time is up.
aren't really leaders in this area. They're more followers. So we have to build up
Time is
that
up.
pressure from students.
I feel like I've done a lot of work, you know, prior to being on the board, even, you know, at large. Like I was part of the First Nation Student Association. A big
50
part of
seconds.
that was building and establishing community relationships, you know, with Indigenous community members, but also community at large, and providing, you know, running events.
And really saying, you know, we need these support groups and we need to push forward actual real change, systemic change, not just have statements of support that don't necessarily mean much.
50 seconds.
Thank you. But yeah, just, you know, like pushing forward actual change, systemic change, and providing those long-term supports is really, really essential.
It's just my first, I'm just a student. I'm just trying for a student board. So I think that's a good start for me to begin this fight for equity.
Time is up.
One specific event that I'm especially proud of is FastFest 2019, which was a flash event for freshman students, which we held it on campus at West Mall Center, and that was 24 hours long.
50 seconds.
So many forces and volunteers to make sure that this event was fun and accessible and safe.
The first one being that consistent and more accessible support is given to both pre-existing and newly made clubs and DSUs to have more accessible and engaging events so that people can get over the student empathy. Having more events that focus on mental and sexual health, have better bursaries and food programs, and also to represent marginalized groups so that they don't feel like
Time is up.
Of course, this year we've had quite a tough conversation about the inclusion and, you know, treatment about, you know, Black and Indigenous folk alongside people of color. How have you personally reckoned with your own privilege and unconscious bias? And how will you apply your own knowledge into action?
I was very much involved throughout 2020. I do want to come out here and say, like, throughout my life, I've been up for marginalized communities. No, I was part of a marginalized community in India. For the past few years, I spent a lot of time educating myself because this was not part of my culture. I didn't have a lot of exposure back in India with Black
Time is up.
Thank you for your answer, Avni. I know, like, it's very important to be educating ourselves, and that's really essential. I think it's really important to understand that Black and Indigenous folk have very specific experiences contrary to ones of us as POC. And I think it's really important to allow them to have a say on the table and to even speak for themselves and amplify. So sometimes it's like something I'm like looking into is really, you know, sometimes stepping back and just amplifying.
You talked a lot about your fight for Black communities, Indigenous communities, but I also want to ask you, what were your efforts towards people of color, LGBT communities, and maybe also supporting international students on campus? Because a lot of times we don't see that international students don't have the same resources as domestic students.
Of course, I'm a POC as well. I come from Egyptian descent, and I've already had to represent POC on the SFSS BIPOC committee board in order to make several decisions on behalf of POC folk. That being said, you know, like, being a representative of the BIPOC committee doesn't only mean you're representing race, you're also representing other marginalized communities. And it's very important not to compromise on those communities and having a say, but also just like creating that space as well. So that's like the
Time is up.
So I've worked with various levels of involvement with the SFU student body, staff, and various faculties and departments. It seems as if you haven't reached out to the groups and student unions or worked with any before within SFU and lack familiarization with SFSS events, clubs, and club policies, or have experiences with large events in SFU and SFSS history that has been crucial to our community for the past many years. What have you done so far to reach out to and work with various counselors and departmental and faculty student unions, specifically to amplify them prior to this election in any in-person or remote capacities?
So I used to work with student engagement and at the Fire Pits, which is basically the home to any event that SFU hosts. So I have indirectly worked with hosting these events and making sure that everything goes out without a hitch. SFU and student engagement, even though they don't work like together collaboratively, they do work indirectly in making sure that SFU is a more inclusive and diverse community. How do you plan to make your events accessible for marginalized communities and POCs?
So again, it's about working with the communities that are already doing the work. So Women's Center, out on campus, and other communities that are already having these resources and collaborating with, training with them, and Marie, if she wins for VPES, to create these resources and toolkits for that students and student executives are trained and to make sure that their events are accessible. So again, as I said earlier, that they would make content and trigger warnings, encourage students to share their pronouns and their preferred names and their access needs so that that space, in person and remote, is equitable and safe for everyone.
And hi, everyone. My name's Gabe Leosis. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm running to be your next president. The university needs to make an effort to be researching different forms of community policing that aren't harmful to BIPOC communities. The SFSS isn't going to look the same as it did starting May 1st as it does right now. We're going to have a completely different governing structure. Right now we have a board of directors of 16 that manage the society. Next, starting May 1st, we're going to have an executive committee of 7 that is also accountable to a council, which is going to be the legal board of directors, which brings in a whole new set of voices to the society's top decision-making body. One of the biggest issues, not the only issue, is the cost of tuition. And I want to say that right now, I 100% support a tuition freeze. We mobilized students. We told them why this was so important and how they could get involved. We organized an email campaign. We made videos. And we were screaming at the university saying, we need this and we need this now. And because of that student advocacy, we were able to get a motion onto the Senate floor to instate an alternative grading scheme. And in the end, it ended up passing with an overwhelming majority. I think that last bit of your question, representing all of us, is key, because we really need to be ensuring that, you know, we're not only representing all of us, but we're representing the voices that need our support most. I operate by a very simple slogan, and that is work with the university where there is areas of collaboration we can identify, but hold them accountable on what they are not doing well. Thank you everyone so much for coming out and taking the time to come to this debate and engage in student democracy. That's so important in our day-to-day lives. Change takes continuous pressure. And I feel that with my deep understanding of our new governance system that the SFSS is adopting, and as a current incumbent board member, I have a solid understanding of how to push for these changes within the SFU bureaucracy, and that I have the relevant experience to be your president.
Time is up.